Peter Stege, great to have you on the show again. Round two, book two. For people who don't know you, Pete, give us an intro, a swirl on who is Pete.
Thanks, Minter. It's so great to be on your show again. I like to say I was born an engineer. I'm a rewired engineer. I've spent my career helping businesses grow from the inside and now out on the outside. Um, and my career's been spanned a whole bunch of different businesses. The things that they had in common were that they were all in technology industries. And I had a lot of experience on the marketing side, but also strategy, sales, even some operations. And I guess I have a real passion for this idea that meaning matters in business, and stories are really at the center of how things work, and purpose is what unites customers and businesses. So I've just found as I've worked with now I work with CEOs and helping them grow their business. I found that that's really where I live, where I get excited is finding that meaning for them and how they can share it with their market and their audience and their employees too to make everything work better.
So there's a lot of things that we're going to unpack. You in your book, you have this really interesting CMP framework. You talk about the accidental CEO. In fact, that's in your subtitle, Radical Clarity: How Accidental CEOs Uncover Meaning, Lead with Purpose, and Accelerate Growth. So for starters, Pete, does can everyone find meaning? Does everyone find meaning?
Yes, it's oxygen. It's like oxygen for life. That's my belief. Um, think about, well, first let's just talk about it from the business perspective. I believe that the simple definition of business viability is meaning, is purpose. And the reason I say that is to do something, to transact, to choose whether you pay for it or invest in it, whatever you do, you really have to have a reason for doing that. It might be a very surface level reason, but the deeper it is, the more you're willing to commit to it. And businesses that recognize that, right? That's at the core of every interaction, every decision by customers, partners, investors to commit um, comes from that shared meaning. Um, Personally, I have found that meaning makes the world go round. It's that same thing about transactions applies to me when I wake up in the morning, right? What am I going to do with this day? Is it is it more than just this satisfying this itch, right, that I have? And so I'm just a real big believer that meaning just is the oxygen for life.
Well, so I entirely agree with you, Pete. I mentioned before we started recording about John Vervaeke and the crisis of meaning, or the meaning crisis that he talks about. It feels like a lot of people lack oxygen, to use your term, and therefore aren't finding meaning, or are not are sort of oblivious of the potency of a real meaning. And to use your second idea of the sort of the lighter touch versions of meaning, these could be, as the meaning, we want to be profitable. However, that is about as, let's say, banal as it gets, and I don't think that that really inserts oxygen into people's lives. Just being profitable, it can for some, for a time, but then it runs out.
Simon Sinek wrote a book called The Infinite Game. Have you read that book?
I certainly have.
That came to mind with what you just said. I believe the companies that view their business as a game, a win-loss, a finite game, are the ones that put profit at the top, or the corporately designed and manipulated mission statement. That's all about winning now, whether it's this year and 3 years, or the stock price getting this level, selling, whatever it might be. The infinite game is what you and I are talking about, or aspiring to. It's this idea that you never win, you you progress, right? And that progression is towards that meaning is what provides stability for you personally and for your business, because it can withstand the shifts and the unexpected changes because it's not about, well, this happened. I'm not going to win that thing that I have in my mind. Rather, it's, oh, this is the new situation. How do I apply that new input to my destination that I'm on a journey to, right? And that perspective to me really makes the difference between that superficial meaning, I guess if you want to call it that, the superficial reason versus true meaning.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, usually the sort of d variability or vagueness of the term is around the word purpose as opposed to meaning. What's your purpose? Well, we're here to please the shareholder. We're here to make money for the shareholder. That sort of purpose is that's where it
Yep.
gets a little bit typically clogged down. And in listening to you, Pete, the glory of conversations, it made me think of the notion of durability. Whereas you might have the finite leaders who are there, know how to drive the results, extract every juice from every orange that they squeeze. But at the end of the day, when they have to turn over the handle to somebody else, the wheel, it just doesn't going to work. And so maybe the idea that came into my mind was meaning provides true succession, as in it allows for a more durable form of success as opposed to look at me, the hero of the leader, as opposed to
Yes.
us as a communal success trip.
When you get to the true meaning, I believe it transcends ego. It transcends a personality. And there are examples of CEOs that have such a gift of a charismatic personality. And maybe that gift has warped their understanding of their role and their value, and it becomes about them. And to your point, that doesn't work long. That for the infinite game, that doesn't work. For the finite game, it does.
Or it can anyway.
Can. Not always, you're right.
Because I mean, just whipping people and say, do better, do more, pay you
Right.
more, can actually go south. It reminds me that about 4 or 5 years ago, I had this bee in my bonnet to write another book, which was all about the true leadership is selfless, and that the route to that is to drop a dose of LSD and learn how to sublimate your ego and to understand the infinitesimally small meaning that or value that you are in the universe, and think differently about
Yes.
who we are and why we're together and so on and so forth. But alas, that book is still in the cobwebs. All right, so let's talk about this accidental CEO, which you talk about the accidental CEO, right? Accidental CEOs are good at their job. Their businesses are robust with aggressive goals and huge potential. Their industry peers respect them, but inside, they don't always feel that way. They wonder if they can do better. So talk to us about how you came up with this idea, the origin of the idea of the accidental CEO, and how many are there really accidental CEOs?
Well, I don't have any extensively researched studies that are quantified on how many there are, but my belief is that about half of the CEOs you run into would relate to that idea that accidental CEO. I have the experience of meeting people and telling them what I do and say I help CEOs grow their business, accidental CEOs. And before I explain what I mean, they laugh or nod or oh, they get it at their core, right? Um, yeah, my belief is that, and my experience is that uh, technical, technically forward people. They might be engineers by training or scientists or policy wonks or soldiers. They have a passion for a skill, something, and they've invested in it, and it turns them on, right? They're good at it. Those that end up starting a company or taking over a company from the lens of that technical or domain expertise, they're vulnerable to that imposter syndrome maybe more so than the person that decided early on, I have the identity or the aspiration to be a CEO. These technical people, first of all, they don't have that identity, right? seeing that label is uncomfortable. It's a garment that doesn't fit very well, at least at first. So that's part of that imposter syndrome. The other part of it is just the difference between logic and emotion. When you're the product leader or you're the technical leader and you're succeeding in your industry based on that, a lot of that is based on quantified data or things that are facts, right? And when you cross over to the CEO, you're still in charge of that stuff, but now you have a team that needs meaning. um, and you might not even understand that that's what they're hungry for, but such a different domain than that making that product sing.
Mm.
And then what about I have to do fundraising? I have to, um, you name it, right? There's all these new things that are um, not only overwhelming, the stakes are so much higher because it's no longer just you and your career and maybe your family. It's these employees' career. It's the stockholders. It's just such a bigger arena. So all those things together make the accidental CEOs have more struggles with that imposter syndrome or those blind spots even.
Mm. I was reading about how they have this clinic in Switzerland. I think it's in Switzerland that's designed for a maximum of four people at a time in order for each to be completely isolated one from the other. And the idea of the clinic is to help the oh so depressed, oh so lonely, famous people in the world, big CEOs amongst them. And they do it in ways discretionary because you don't want to be seen at this, depressed clinic as the CEO of somebody, much less than newspapers. But it does feel like not only do a lot of CEOs come to the table without the requisite trainings or understandings of the amplitude of the job, they are inevitably isolated because people put them on pedestals, and the way people approach them is that it makes for a very lonely job.
Oh, it's such a lonely job, and it's not just due to what other people choose that put them on that pedestal. The fact is, when you are the decider, when the decisions come to you and nobody else, by definition, you're alone with that. Nobody else can carry that with you to a certain extent. I believe that some people have skills, personal skills that allow them to manage that, cope with it, maybe even use it in a positive way. But it's not, that's a gift if they have that, right? There's a lot of accidental CEOs who don't have that special gift, and it is lonely. It's a very lonely job.
So let's talk about this notion of meaning, because at the end of the day, it's sort of the central to your two books, and essential to the whole, even let's say your CMP framework. Meaning is the quiet power that truly drives business success, as you write. You argue that meaning isn't just a nice to have; it's a business imperative. Well, let's sort of batten down the hatches, maybe put some qualifying elements to what is meaning. Because we talked at the very beginning about sort of the superficial type of meaning. Is there a hierarchy of meaning? Is there too much meaning? Well, how do you establish meaning in a business context?
I believe that their meaning is like truth. It's related to truth, and it's a universal, pure thing. And finding meaning in your business is a matter of tapping into that pure truth. And it has degrees in terms of how much of that pure, powerful meaning you uncover. So I view it as it's this maybe mostly hidden, powerful core truth that drives in your business case that particular story. But in our world, I just believe it's that pure, super thing. And it's really about uncovering it and how to what extent you can find it and share it with, first of all, own it yourself, share it with your team, like inject it into your team, and then share it with your market, right? It's really about tapping into something that doesn't change. It's just so it's degrees of how much you uh, can use. If that may be a little abstract, but I really think it's true.
Going, if you look at companies, why is it that they need to read your book? Why, in other words, how is it that we're still talking about meaning? If it's such an evident thing to look for, how many companies actually orient themselves, organize themselves at a personal and professional level around a singularly true meaning?
I think that meaning, I just said I think it's so important. One, I don't think the culture or business school for sure, or engineering school talks about it as being important. So it does have to be discovered that, you have to decide that it's there and it's important. The other reason it's not tapped into, even though it's important, is that it's so much easier and reassuring, and I'm in control of activity and doing things. I can, you know, automate this. I can, do this email campaign. I can, create this program over here. All these things. And more and more with AI and other tools, doing is easy. And you don't have to think about the meaning, which is harder work to do. But doing it that way, you are, I believe meaning is not a vacuum, right? It's there. So if you don't choose your meaning will get chosen for you by these things you do subconsciously, the activities you do. You just end up with your company represents this thing, or you personally represent this value or this thing. You didn't
Mm.
choose it, but there has to be a meaning. So it's getting chosen for you. So I think that's what happens is people don't respect the power of meaning, don't acknowledge that there's a truth that they stand for or they want to stand for, and therefore they go and do things and end up being whatever the consequences of their activity and their investments and their decisions end up with. And the
That's
companies that succeed are the ones that intentionally do the hard work to uncover that true meaning. And by the way, if I may, think of exercise, think of diet, think of other habits that are work. But at the end of the day, if you commit to that, it's so much value there, right? It's the same kind of thing.
mm. Well, there's a sense of achievement, of getting through a struggle that also provides meaning. I want to circle in on this notion of radical clarity and your framework, the CMP framework. You write, clarity reveals meaning, meaning sparks purpose, and purpose activates your business and your life, which I thought was a really interesting sequence of expressions that, of course, underpins the CMP, clarity, meaning, and purpose. To what extent must this be a personal quest, or can it just be relinquished, if you will, or delegated to being a specifically professional quest of meaning?
My experience is with CEOs that are responsible for us. It's not a mega corporation. So, my experience is focused on these businesses where there is a person in charge. They may not even have a board. They might. And in that environment, I believe it only works, this CMP in a company setting really only works if you have a leader that is driving it. And that's because you can't, as a company, you can't find your true story without the CEO, right? The person in charge has to be at the center of that truth. Otherwise, the alternative is, let's say the team, gets together because the CEO is busy or whatever doing fundraising and comes up with this is what our truth is. How can it be your truth if the one that makes the core decisions wasn't part of that? It can't happen. That's my belief. So it has to start with the leader. And in my experience, it's one person. And that one person has to drive back to the point about the exercise, the discipline of it. You have to make choices that are for the infinite game, and there's going to be some short-term sacrifice. And if the leader isn't on board with this direction, then those decisions won't happen.
Okay. And then let's just focus on this leader and think about the leader's personality and personal beliefs and personal lifestyle. To what extent is this quest for a meaning have to jive with the leader's personal elements, personal values, personal stories, personal experience?
When I work with CEOs, we take the tack of starting with their belief system or their meaning about their business. As an accidental CEO, they are in this leadership seat because they believe in this thing. They have a vision for this product, this solution, this technology, and how it's going to make a difference. Sometimes they might not say that's true, but if you peel it away, they couldn't make any revenue if they didn't have a solution for somebody, right? It really does come down to solving a problem. So we start there. Why did you do this? What's behind it? We're getting to their meaning. We're uncovering that meaning for them. The company is not them, but my belief is this meaning is bigger than the CEO and the company. And so when we're doing that uncovering of the CEO's purpose and for this business, we're getting at something that's bigger than the CEO, but it's totally in sync with the CEO, right? So it's really, I guess the short answer to what you're saying is we don't start with the personality and the motives of the CEO. We start with the valuable thing that they wanted to give the world that has meaning beyond just them. They tapped into it, and then that becomes the center of this CMP and this growth and this true story for the business. And that's consistent with the CEO because they came up with it or the origin, right? But it also travels to the others, employees, customers, market.
Yeah, that's where I maybe really had an enlightenment when I was running Redken, because what I did, like you, I sort of found this meaning, and the part that I was very intentional about was relating that into me, as in, what about this meaningful quest, this mission, is meaningful to me? And in the specific example, as we were dealing with hairdressers, and hairdressers each have a certain number of people, let's say 1,200 people that they have in their black book, we've seen them every so on. And for them, for these customers, that hairdresser is a very special moment. And therefore, and the personal relationship I had with that thought was with my mother-in-law, how she would tell me about how the hairdresser was such an important part of her week, once a week. So that made it really meaningful to me. And that's part of that crafting idea that I think can, maybe ratchet it up from just being a truth about the company to a truth that's going to drive the inner me, maybe the child me as well.
As I wrote the book, the term meaning started to shift to shared meaning. And I think that's what we're talking about.
Mm.
Meaning's value comes from it going crossing between, right, and being shared, being transmitting the value. I think that's what you're
So,
saying.
yeah, so going to radical clarity,
Yeah.
um, what does radical clarity mean to you, and why is it so essential in your framework when we're having so many complex, different, pulls on us, pressures? How does it reveal meaning, radical clarity?
We've talked a lot about this meaning, the power of this meaning, and it is there, but it's hidden. I believe, look at our society, look at the lives we live. I don't know about you, but I have way more that I could do than I could ever do. There's so many options in our lives. It's true for business. We have too many priorities. We have too many emails in our inbox. We have, all those things. It's true for me personally. I wish I had more hours in the day, I could do more things. And society, the volume of society is getting turned up every month. And I see that continuing, especially with the changes in technology, and our lives are going to continue to be a subset of the possibles, right? So in that noisy, complex world where I can choose something with a click of a button, I can take a new path with a just a nod of my head almost. Um, the easier it gets for me to choose things, the more um, I'm living at a level above the quiet truth. So, radical clarity is saying that you have to do something different if you really want to tap into the powerful meaning. And you know, a saying I have that summarizes it all to me, Mentor, is, well, two things. One, make room for meaning. That's a new mantra for me. Make room for meaning. It applies to me in my personal life. Is don't don't look on my phone when I can just sit and look at the trees, right? Sometimes that kind of thing. It's true for business. Well, everything we're talking about, it's about CEOs making room for meaning. That's what the CMP process is about too. And how do you do that? Find your truth and get out of the way. That's my advice for a CEO in a nutshell. Find that true story, that everything we've been talking about, that nugget of value and meaning and truth. And then rather than adding things and creating more and more, we got enough. Take away things, right? Get out of what's blocking that truth from getting to your employees? What's preventing that truth from spreading to your prospects and your clients and your investors in the market? So it's a reverse. Radical clarity says it's a subtraction opportunity. We all have enough. We have too much in every category, and you got to make room for this valuable stuff, or it won't show up. It'll stay
I
hidden.
read again. I like the way you express that. This idea of the ease and convenience and the number of choices that creates a sort of a cloud and or layer that removes you one step or several steps away from what is the true story. So I really like that. But I mean, if we stay thinking about true story, what makes a story true to everybody, and how do you actually do that in a way that unites and unifies customers and your employees?
I have a framework, a work process that we go through together with clients. It's called the truth chain. And the premise of it is that there is that truth, and the reason it's not available for you to share is that, especially if you're an accidental CEO, your first knee-jerk reaction is to tell them about what you created, tell them about this cool technology, tell them about this capability that's going to change the world. And don't get me wrong, it may change the world. But when you're talking about yourself, your business, it goes right over the head of your prospects, because your prospects care about their problems and how you can help them solve it. So what the truth chain does is translates your understanding of your truth, why you started this business, which is one end of this chain, this 5-link chain, to the other end of the chain, which is that target customer you have that you can help them. You absolutely know if they knew what you could do for them, they would drop everything and work with you because they're such a perfect client. So with the exercise we go through is we first get really clear on, why did you start this business? And we're like, what I was saying before. That's that clarity, saying, what gets me up in the morning? Why are my employees here every day? Why do I fight through the hard times? So we got that. Then we say, and who is it that that's for, right? Because you have to picture somebody that this amazing thing you do helps. Okay, let's get really, really specific about them. I like to describe them as bullseye customers rather than target customers. And then those are the two ends of the chain. And then we go one chain closer from our side, we say, and what is our special sauce? What is it that our superpowers that make us the only ones that can do this special thing, right? And then from the customer side, what is it that person we can help that keeps them up at night? What are the pains that they're thinking about all the time that are relevant to what we can do? At that point, you're one link away. Then we work on the linchpin, which is how we can help you with that problem. And that's the nugget, that's the center of this true story, because now you're not talking about me, I'm not talking about myself. You're talking about your client and how you can help them. So it's other focused, right? It's generosity is a really big part of this. I'm a big believer in customer centricity, but on steroids. You know, it's really, if it's not about your client, it's it's getting in the way. If at the end your motive for a meeting, for an investment, whatever else is not about your client, a strategy, then back to the infinite game. You're not playing for the long game.
That makes consummate sense. And it's a really powerful set of links. I was really following you into that, Pete, and I liked it very much. So we live in a world that is extremely chaotic. And you write about that. You said clarity of purpose is also the glue that holds things together as you chaotically scale. Feels like having that truth sort of approach to seeking truth and linking it to the customer is a great way. However, or at least what are the one of the things that one can smell sometimes is being too missionary and being too purpose led. And if you drank too much of the Kool-Aid, then you have dogma that sort of seeps in. And can you and how do you bend rules and bend over or adjust, let's say, when you might have an ethical question that competes performance with purpose?
That's a great question. And I guess as I think about it, to me, the key to that is a lightness of structure here. And we talk about this truth. As the CEO, my role in that is once I know what it is, that is the gold. That is the precious, it's not much, it's a nugget, right? It's a simple expression of our purpose, our shared meaning. To me, the answer to your question to avoid it becoming dogma is to um, don't be too rigid in your documentation and your process and your this and that. Back to what I said about, the corporate driven mission statement. That's brittle and it's overbearing and it's not reflecting the spirit of this meaning. And so it's really the CEO's job, the accidental CEO's job, to be the bearer of the guardian of this truth. And every day, if you're in a meeting and the topic of, maybe the meeting's about a product design, you make sure, if nobody else does, to ask the questions. Now, how does this affect our bullseye customer? What about this? What about that? It's modeling and being the keeper of the flame for this reason that drives everything. That's not dogma, right? Because it's not a bureaucracy. It's not and it's up to you to keep it fresh. And then you do all your processes and all your priorities and all of your project management happens as it should with good rigor and all that. But it's fueled by the meaning rather than stratified by it.
One of the Great answer. One of the segments of your book that appealed to me immensely was this notion of taking risks. And maybe my reason for that is I feel like we're a society that has lost its taste for risk from a societal perspective, but also from a business perspective. You're right. The only way for businesses to stand out is to take a risk. If you find your truth, that becomes a well calculated risk, one that you need to be willing to take because that's who you are. You say that standing out requires risk, but how can leaders identify which risks are the ones worth taking And how do you encourage more calculated, I suppose, risk taking?
Well, the first risk is I'm a big believer in what I call market singularity. Once you've got that true story, the next thing that we usually work on is positioning and how do we fit in the world. And I'm a big believer that every company should aspire to, and most can achieve, the ability to be the only alternative for the thing they do. Um, and what I mean by that, there's a guy named Chris Lockhead who's written several books. Do you know Chris?
Of course, I've had him on
Okay.
my show.
So category design is the
Pirate, a
spirit of
pirate.
this.
He's the
There you
pirate.
go. That's the spirit of this. The idea that you're leaving something up on the table if you don't come up with the true, not make it up. Find the true way that what you do, the combination of your capabilities and people or whatever it might be, cannot be replicated for this target you have. That is so much power, right? Because now you're no longer on a spreadsheet with five other vendor choices that, we have to work with you because we want that thing you promise, right? I bring that up because that's a risk. That is totally a risk. That's the first risk. We're going to totally commit to being this thing that nobody else is. That's scary. It could be scary. Um, and then this is maybe a trite answer, but how do you adapt to how much risk and how much? If that's your focus, we're going to be that thing and we're going to be the only ones. And what does success look like? And we vision that success across our customer journey, across our product roadmap, across the market landscape. That's where we're going. What risks do we need to take to get there? And that's the appropriate risks. And you balance, you're a good manager of your funds and all that. So you do appropriate risks, but your risk options are driven by your destination.
It feels like a couple of things. On the one hand, we have all the barriers to taking risks, as in your HR person, your legal officer, maybe your shareholder saying, you better be fiduciarily responsible, and the press can eat you up. And so we have all these things that sort of, iron out the idea of standing out. And then you have the other one, which is sort of the other end of the spectrum, where people take risks because they can, and or because they think that's what they ought to do. So I'm going to make a really steamy social media post
Yeah.
where I'm going to say something entirely provocative because that'll get me press, and no press is bad press kind of attitude. So how do you qualify the good risk in this sense, that setting?
What's your motive? What's your motive? Um, are you moving the company forward with this shared meaning, or are you getting a little high from getting noticed on social media? Because there might be a scenario that with this shared meaning you have, the right tool for that is to make a big storm on social media. I'm not a fan. I don't like it personally. But if that's in service to that higher goal, then you should do it appropriately, with the right risk. Um, I would I would question the motives of a CEO that has a habit of getting on the, you know, getting noticed because of the outrageous things they do. Um, I think more often than not, that's a more selfish motive than helping advance the company along that really important goal. But I think it comes down to motive. I really do.
Well, I think that's a really great way of phrasing it, Pete. Again, what you were coming back to something we talked about at the very beginning is this idea of succession, as in, I am just a captain in the night
Yes.
of
Yes.
one day, of 1 year, of a century of this company. And having that type of an orientation where we are clear, the radical clarity on what is our motive, what is our purpose, then if you want to have a provocative statement, that becomes our mojo. But that's how we're going to hire people. That's what we do going on. The two biggest, and one of the biggest typical mistakes I see is sort of hiring a provocative social media manager
Yeah.
who gets
Yeah.
all the likes and the in this and that, but then leaves. And
Yep.
then what? But you haven't crafted a sort of a more a textured, full boat, everybody's in the same boat type of approach to that motive. And therefore it's more like a thrashing in the night as opposed to some sort of bigger, more momentous movement over time.
Your example, even if they don't leave, what price did they pay to get those likes? Did they stay true to that message and that purpose? Maybe, but so if you prioritize the likes, or if that's what's driving the behavior, you end up on a different trajectory, right? You can end up on a different trajectory. But I love what you said. It's not about you as a CEO. It's not about you. It's bigger than you.
Hence the the notion of a psychedelic idea as well. But let's finish with somewhere you close your book talking about unbounded potential of meaning. You write the meaning behind your company has unbounded potential. You may not achieve it, the market may not be there now, or there's something else in the way that you won't see without moving forward. But isn't it worth the effort to evolve as a CEO to try? What advice do you have for anyone who's listening, even if they're not the CEO or an accidental CEO, just a leader in general, who are hesitant to pursue this path, fearing it might not pay off or they might look silly or something like that?
I'm going to go back to what I said before about making room for meaning. I think we all are hungry for that truth about why we're here, what we're doing, and for accidental CEOs that are considering uh, leading a company or growing a company, scaling a company, and all the sacrifice and the challenge and risk of doing that and the work. Um, I encourage them to get quiet, take some time to let the dust settle, let the clouds, the smoke clear, and ask yourself, is this important to me? Is this important to the world? And choose. It's not for everyone, for sure. There's a lot of sacrifice, but I've seen a lot of accidental CEOs fulfill, their destiny in a way, right? That's why they're here, and they're getting a lot of satisfaction from delivering on that meaning that they discovered in their career.
Well, where our paths cross, Steve, Steg, and I was going to say Steve, no, Pete Steg, is this quest for meaning. And I feel like this is not something that just accidental CEOs should be striving for. Whether you were dyed in the wool CEO, accidental or not, it feels like the biggest issue we have in our world today is a lack of meaning. And people, I feel, need to lift the hood on what is like your radical clarity, presumably, is the method for that. But for us to re-engage with maybe that quiet that you're talking about, put your hands in the soil. Johann Hari's book, The Lost Connections, is a great book, I think, for any leader to think about as well, and help us return to some kind of sense, common sense, maybe, as another way of putting it in our world and in the businesses we run. Comment, and then we'll finish.
Amen. I totally agree.
So, Pete, great chatting with you again. How can someone grab your book? It's came out just in the month of June, and or get in touch with you to hire you, understand what you're up to.
Well, the book's available on Amazon, and it's in all the formats. They can get it there. I've created a landing page for your listeners that I'm going to have some bonus resources, access to the book, some frameworks from the book available for people that want to get it. It's going to be at my website, b2b-clarity.com/mentor. So anybody that goes there, hopefully you can put that in the show notes, and we'll have bonus resources just for you guys.
Well, all listeners, if you listen this far, there you have it. You've got a bonus, a gift from Pete. Many thanks, Pete. I look forward to staying in touch and catching on how this meaning progresses in our world.
Thank you so much. Look forward to our next chat.